Forgiveness, and this applies to everybody, and applies to not just our marriage relationship, but applies to every relationship that we have. And it's something that it can be difficult to forgive. It can be difficult to do the things like he was saying, and asking for apology, or not just giving apologies, but asking for forgiveness and trying to mend those relationships, and understanding how, even though it's difficult for us a lot of times, and sometimes we just outright don't want to do it, understanding what God has done for us and forgiving us, it's very, very hard to be honest with yourself and honest with God when you know how much God has forgiven us, and then we hold something against anybody. It's difficult. I'm not saying that makes it go away. I'm not saying that makes us be like we can just get over it that quickly and easily. I understand that. But we have to look at it in that light, in that aspect, because it's really hard to say we don't forgive somebody else when we know what God has done for us. So we'll talk about that forgiveness with us within our marriage, and that's kind of what I want you to think about is your husband and your wife, and the relationship that we have. And again, the longer you're married, right, the more opportunities there are to be offensive, right? The more opportunities there are to do things that are just mean or hurtful. The more you get to know each other, and the longer you spend together, you know what buttons to push that can be hurtful. You know the things that you can say that can get to people or get to your spouse. And the temptation to do that is always going to be there. And it's not going to just go away. It's a constant thing you have to work on, a constant thing you have to fight yourself and your flesh against doing those things. But the analogy that is given is traveling light with luggage, right? The more you hold on to bitterness, or anger or hurt, that grows into bitterness, that grows into anger, the heavier that load becomes. And when you think about it, when you're traveling with luggage, you can like any airline, right? They have a limit on how much you can carry in your carry-on case. And if it goes over, you got to pay extra, and it becomes a problem the more you take. But we tend to, as humans, want to take more stuff than sometimes we need, right? I mean, we just got back from a trip, right, to Tennessee. And my wife has done very good, especially in the last few years. She packs pretty much everybody but myself, right? She with Carter, it's more suggestions now. But, with the girls, it's like the girls aren't picking out their clothes. She picks all the clothes for them. With Carter, she's like, all right, here's the things you need. Even with me, she's like, all right, make sure you have one of these, one of those, some of this, and then just lets us do it. Used to be, though, especially with babies, you feel like you got to have everything just in case. Right, you've got to have extra bibs, extra clothes, extra diapers. You got to have the playpen. You got to have the toys because maybe Grandma and Grandpa's house don't have those anymore. And you just load up the car, right? If you're traveling that way with stuff, and you get there. At least for us, we go to Tennessee, and so we travel down to Pigeon Forge, and that's just a tourist trap area. So we get trapped, and we bring more stuff home than we did when we went. Somehow it's fuller. So we pack the car on the way there. Like, all right, we got to leave room for the other stuff that we're going to bring back. So don't pack as much on the way because we know we're going to have more when we come back. And then if you know my wife at all, she don't laugh. She loves driftwood, okay? She likes to decorate with driftwood, and I'll admit it looks cool. And you get some really cool shapes from dead trees that you just find. So there's a lake down there called Lake Norris, and it used to be a giant river, and they built a dam, and it's hundreds of feet deep in some areas. It's huge, and it's beautiful, surrounded by trees, in the Smoky Mountains. It's amazing. It's a beautiful lake. And so whenever you have a bunch of trees by rivers and lakes, those trees fall over. You get dead trees, and they float, and they're on the shore. Well, it's gotten to the point where her dad has a handsaw on the boat. So that way, if you find anything cool, you can go out and you can he's in a life jacket in like 50-foot deep water with a tree had fallen over, and he's sawing part of this tree, he's just in there, and she's got a video of it, and he's just going to town sawing this branch. And so on the way home, I have 3 pieces of wood, dead trees from Tennessee that are in my car coming back to South Dakota. Now we get here, and she puts them in the garden. They're out front. It looks awesome. It's really cool looking. But then in the moment when you're like, I'm bringing dead trees. We're spending a lot of time and effort. Like he's in the lake sawing, and the saw is rusted now because it's been on a boat, but he's still using it. It's fine. And it's the last thing we're getting to pack in to come back on Friday morning. It's like 3:30 in the morning, And I'm like, I've got this piece of wood, and it kind of looks like a V, right, which is our last name. So it's like, it's like I have to hold it like this. Everything's in. I've got like this much window out my back window to see through the rearview mirror. I'm like, I don't know where to put this thing, right? And she's like, just leave it. I'm like, no. I play Tetris. I'm good at that. We're getting this in here. And so sure enough, I found a way to get it in there. Now, Gemma's safety may not have been that great in the back seat of my home, but that's neither here nor there. We got it to fit, and we're coming home, and it's like, we're packed to the brim with stuff. And so when you overpack, it can become a burden, right? It can become a burden to the person packing. It can become a burden to the one sitting in the back seat where the wood might, if you take the sharp turn, it could fall right and hit her in the head, right? It can become a burden when you overpack and bring too much. Things that maybe, I'm not saying we don't need the wood, but we don't need it. She wants it. I was going to say we want it, but she wants it, and it's cool, and there's some cool things about it, but we don't need it, right? But when you overpack, you can overdo it, and it can become a burden. And we, even in our Christian marriages, sometimes we overpack. Sometimes we hang on to luggage that we don't need to hang on to anymore. Sometimes we stuff things into our luggage and just keep holding it and think that I haven't really gotten over it. I haven't let go of this problem maybe we had in our marriage with an argument or discussion or hurt that was had, and I haven't let it go. I don't bring it up anymore, but I got it stuffed into my bag. Right, and it's in there, and I know it's there. We don't really talk about it that much. We don't really even see it, but it's heavy, and it's becoming heavier. And the more stuff we put into that luggage, and the more baggage we have, the heavier that load becomes. And it can burden you down in everything else, not just in that area that the hurt has come from or the disagreement has come from, but every area of your marriage, every area of your life can become a burden because you're carrying this heavy baggage around. And that's the idea with forgiveness, and what Brother Tim said last week is that you let it go. You have to let it go because it's only going to hurt you, right? It's like he said, it's that poison that you feel like you're giving to your enemy or your spouse in that moment trying to hurt them, but really you're just hurting yourself, and you're hurting that relationship. So taking those offenses and those hurts and stuffing them into that luggage and hanging on to them for however long, sometimes, I've known people that have hung on to him for 40, 50 years. And it's a problem in their marriage still because they just have not been able to resolve it, not been able to get over it. And it's a burden on your entire life, not just those areas. So as Christians, we want to get rid of that. We want to let go of those burdens. We want to take care of the hurts that are there and resolve them. And the week before when I taught, 3 weeks ago, we talked about conflict, when conflict comes up. When conflicts come, you can't just leave them unresolved. They have to be resolved. You want to resolve them. You want to get to the point where the hurt is addressed and you come to a resolution and forgiveness, because if you don't, it leads to this type of baggage, and we want to get rid of those things. So I've talked past many things I wanted to say. But overpacking can become a burden. It takes offenses and we hold on to them, and it creates a wounded spirit, right? And so if you have unforgiveness or hurt in your marriage that hasn't been dealt with, and maybe one party thinks it's dealt with or is even unaware that exists, but you know it's there deep down inside. It's maybe not something that comes up all the time or you think about every day, but there is something there that hurts, and as you're hanging on to it, creates a wounded spirit. And that wounded spirit, if you've got that in your marriage, it's a wound. And the idea is that the wound that festers, it's an open wound, and it's not healing, and it's going to affect everything. It's going to affect every aspect of your relationship with your spouse if there's a wound in there. Proverbs 18:14 says, the spirit of man will sustain his infirmity, right? Meaning the spirit that he has, his attitude, the way he conducts his life will sustain him if he does get hurt, but a wounded spirit who can bear. If you have a spirit that's wounded, if there's something in that relationship that is wounded, it's not healing. There's nobody that can actually bear that and have a good life. It's going to cause problems. So we want to get rid of that wounded spirit. It's too heavy for us to lug around and carry. It's only going to cause damage, not just in your relationship, but if you have kids in your house or kids someday, wounds in your marriage will affect your children. They will. It'll affect them just based on the way you pass your spirit down and how life is for you. You won't do it intentionally, but it will affect your children, right? Because the children that we have that we're raising in our homes right now, their childhood is, you're making their childhood be what it is, right? What you look back on as your childhood today, right? The good memories, the nostalgia, the fondness, and the negative things, you're creating that for your kids now. And so if you have wounded spirit and something you're lugging around, it will affect what they view as life. And so it's vital that we take care of those things, even if they don't understand that they're there. So how do we travel lighter? We need to learn how to travel lighter. And the best way is to learn to give grace and to learn kindness. Right? I mean, it seems simple, but kindness towards each other, right? Specifically, just being kind. Not angry, not spiteful, not hurtful, not trying to get zingers in, not trying to push buttons, but just kindness, right? And being willing to give grace when mistakes are made and talk through those things and then really become a good forgiver. If we can become good forgivers in our marriage, we will lighten that load. We'll dump out that hurt that we have, be able to get over that and not have to carry it around when it turns into anger or bitterness or something like that. Being a good forgiver allows us to get rid of that. And that's not just, okay, so my spouse then needs to become a good forgiver. No, I need to become a good forgiver. And I need to work on being a forgiver, which means it should be really, really difficult for your spouse to offend you. It should be really difficult for them to do something that brings you to a point where you can't forgive or you struggle to forgive. You might struggle to forgive because you're human, but knowing that about yourself, being a good forgiver will mean that it's going to be really tough for them to do something that offends you. Now, that doesn't mean they have a license to just live however they want. If I'm a good forgiver, you sin against me all you want, and I'll just forgive you every single time. If that's the takeaway from this statement, then you're missing it completely. Right? Then we need to take like 10 steps back and start over somewhere else, because that's not the point. Being a good forgiver is not meaning we're okay with sin or we're okay with hurt. It shouldn't be okay, but we need to be to the point in our marriage where you can be a good forgiver and you look to forgive when hurts come and when disappointments come. So Ephesians chapter 4, drop down to verse number 31. How did I lose Ephesians? There we go. Ephesians 4:31. And this is an application for getting rid of some of the hurt and being able to forgive. Verse number 31 says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you." And we know these verses. We've heard preaching on these verses, and it applies to every relationship you have in our lives. But I want you to apply these verses to your marriage specifically. So to just exclude everyone else for the moment, for this lesson, exclude other relationships you have with parents, with friends, with coworkers, exclude those in this lesson and apply these verses to your spouse. Apply these verses to that relationship specifically. So if we do that and realize that we want to keep these things away, and obviously we're going to go through these things, just like the TSA, right? They have things that are prohibited. Now you can wear your shoes. You don't take your shoes off anymore. Thanks, Christy Nome, I guess. You can keep your shoes on when you go to an airplane. But you can't take more than 3 ounces of liquid, right? There's no knives. You can't have a razor, no guns. There's just things you can't take on an airplane, right? Those are things that are prohibited. Well, verse 31 are the things that are prohibited, right? These are things that are prohibited in your relationship as you travel through life together on this journey as husband and wife. Verse 31 are prohibited items that when you go through the security, they get taken out and left behind. Problem is, we don't go through security, right? We can take all these things with us and cause all the problems that we want. Just like, you take some of those prohibited things on airplanes, they can cause problems. The wrong people can cause problems with those things. So verse 31 are all the prohibited things in our relationships that we don't want to take with us, right? So the first thing is bitterness, and I'll go through these quickly because I kind of spent a long time at the beginning. But just like Pastor Schellenberger said, bitterness is that poison, right? It's the poison that you're taking, you're drinking, you're bitter, and you're drinking this poison hoping that it hurts the other person. Or maybe you're not hoping it hurts your spouse, but you're hoping that they get it. You're trying to prove a point, right? You're withholding whatever, happiness, you're withholding just a good relationship. You avoid, and it's those moments when you get the silent treatment, or the moments when, guys, you put the walls up and you don't talk, and you just give short one-word answers, right? That's the bitterness that you're like, I'm sticking it to them. My wife, my husband, they're going to know I'm upset about this thing. And so you do that hoping that they get the point, but really what you're doing is you're hurting yourself. You're drinking the poison saying, I hope they get it. I hope it's going to get them. Right? Hoping that they're the ones. But what it does is it makes you weaker. Right? It makes us weaker in our relationship. It makes our relationship weaker as a whole. We want to strengthen our marriage. We want our marriage to be good and strong and a good example. And when we give the silent treatment, when we put up walls, when we don't forgive and we hold on to something, we make that entity, the cleaving, right, and the weaving of our relationship, we make it weak. We make it sickly. We think we're proving a point. We think we're trying to make a point and show how we were hurt or we were wronged or they're wrong about this. But all we're doing is we're making our whole relationship sick. And it causes the degradation of that relationship. And if we keep that up too long and hold on to it too long, things are going to start to fall apart. Things are going to start to break. So we want to prohibit bitterness. We want to get rid of it. The next thing is wrath. Wrath is the word is thumos, and it's passion. Which passion can be good, but it's passion as far as fierceness goes, and indignation. It's a despising, right? And you get married, you've been married for any amount of time, you're going to have some wrath towards your spouse. You're going to get mad. You're going to get angry. Those emotions are going to come. And when those emotions come, you need to work through those things and talk through those things. Why? What has caused that? Don't open your luggage and stick that wrath down there and not get over it, hang on to it and carry it along with you. We need to get rid of it. It's prohibited, right? It's the anger that boils just under the surface, right? It's the wrath it's just there, and you might subside, you may put it away for a little bit, but all it takes is something similar to what caused it, very little, and boom, it explodes and it comes out. We say we lose our temper, right? That's a sign of wrath. So we need to get rid of that and prohibit it from carrying with us. And that's tied in with anger, right? And anger, the word anger here it's a abhorrence, violent passion, right? Punishment even, that's the idea here. Punishment, anger is punishment. So trying again to punish your spouse. And anger that blows up. And usually anger comes from a self-centered response, right? When we respond with anger, we are concerned about us. I've been hurt. I've been wronged. You've not done what I want. I've not been taken care of. And so the anger comes out because of how I feel. And that's where anger comes from in every aspect of our life. But again, we're talking about our marriage. If we want to avoid an angry response, focus on a Holy Spirit response, a Spirit-filled response. Instead of being filled with ourselves, or as it says here in Ephesians 2, being drunk with wine, filled with that thing that takes over us or controls us, instead be filled and controlled by the Spirit. And when that anger comes, when the response either comes out as a self-centered response, and that's where anger comes from, but if we decide to respond in how the Spirit would have us respond, that lives within inside of us, the response is not going to be anger. The Holy Spirit is never going to respond that way to our spouse. And so we have to change our self-centered responses to Spirit-filled responses. Next one is clamor. And clamor is an outcry, right? It's basically a yelling. What I would say today is social media angry posts, right? It's the angry posts on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever sources that are out there. It's the angry outcry, just yelling out into the void, right? There's usually more sound than substance to the thing that is causing the sound. But that's clamor. When spouses toss threats or make dramatic claims, right, to get each other's attention. You never do this. You always do that. Those types of responses, those types of threats or claims to get attention. But the problem is those types of things, and if you're on Facebook and stuff like that, you know those things don't work. What is that? It doesn't resolve anything. Clamor doesn't resolve anything. What it does, it creates more of the same. Because then you got the comment section, and it's just a bunch of other people yelling at each other also, and with no substance and nonsense. That's what clamor is. Clamor doesn't fix anything. It's an outcry that creates more anger and more clamor, and it's just a cycle, and it never goes away until someone stops responding, right? That's what clamor is. So within our relationship, making up outrageous claims or even things that might be slightly true towards each other, it's not going to fix or resolve. It's just going to cause more hurt. And then if the other spouse decides to do the same thing, well, yeah, but you also do this, right? If you get blamed, well, you never do this. Well, that's because you don't do this either. There's no resolution there. It's just a cycle of clamor, loud noises. It doesn't do anything. And eventually someone has to stop coming back and forth, and then it goes away. But if you don't resolve that and come back to those things that were said in anger, you're just putting that clamor right into your luggage, and you're carrying it along with you. And now your luggage is even heavier than it was before. So that's prohibited, clamor. Next is evil speaking. Evil speaking comes from the same word we get blasphemous from. It's vilification or evil speaking, railing. It often takes place when talking to others about somebody, right? This is evil speaking is when you talk to your mom and dad, or mom or dad, or your sister, or your best friend, or whoever, your coworker, about your spouse. Good rule of thumb, never talk about your spouse in a negative way to anybody. Like there's never, ever, ever, ever a good reason to talk to someone else that is not your spouse in a negative way about them. Never. It's even with, say you have to counsel and you want to talk to pastor. Don't talk to pastor even negatively about your spouse unless you're together as spouses to talk to pastor about something you're having problems with. Then you bring up the things that you have problems with. But don't even go, pastor, I'm sure would tell you that would not be something he would want to continue on in that moment until your spouse is with you. If you even went to him and said, my wife, pastor, she won't stop doing this, he'd be like, okay, let's all, why don't all three of us talk? Don't ever talk negatively about your spouse to anybody else. That's evil speaking. Just don't do it. Don't complain. Don't criticize your spouse to anyone. It's just a good rule of thumb. Next is malice. Malice is depravity, evil, wickedness, right? When your anger becomes mean. That's what malice is. It's when your anger and your frustration and your hurt becomes mean. And we, again, be embarrassed to say so, but we've probably all been mean to each other at some point or another. With words, with whatever. Meanness is the malice. It's unresolved anger and bitterness that will fuel other sins. Right? When we don't take care of the bitterness, we don't take care of the anger and the hurt, it's a fuel. It's a seeping gas that all it takes is a spark, and now we have other problems. We have other sins that we're dealing with within our relationship. The word says, let all anger be put away from you, is the word ario, which means like to lift up or to let loose. Right? That's why when you let those things go, you feel that lifting, that release, that heaviness kind of departs from your chest that's weighing you down. Because when you carry those things along with you, you may get used to the anger and the bitterness and the heavy load that you're carrying. It just becomes part of life. But when you do let go of some of those things or resolve some of those things, you literally feel a lightness in your chest, like a physical release, a breath, a sigh, a deep breath. And we don't sometimes even realize that those things are just a burden and that they're weighing us down, but they are. And if we need to be able to prohibit all these things in our luggage, in our marriage, don't allow them to become part of what you carry. We have to lighten the load. So that brings us, how do we forgive? Right? Forgiveness isn't just stuffing more baggage in your luggage and forgetting it and getting it out of sight. That's not forgiveness. Right? Forgiveness is not just, let's just move on, but not actually resolving it. Right? Forgiveness is handing the offense to God. Because sometimes there'll be hurts that you have that even if they say they're sorry or even if the argument is resolved, you still feel like you've been slighted. You still feel like, I still don't agree, right, with what we decided to do. I'm letting it go for the sake of the marriage or of the relationship or resolving it, but I'm not still really okay with it. That's not forgiving it. You have to be able to, in those moments, hand it over to God and then trust God to be who he says he is. Right? Trust God to be the judge and releasing your right to pass judgment on your spouse. And because sometimes it may come to that where you feel like, if I let this go, then he or she's getting away with it. And I don't want them to get away with it. And when you release it and you do forgive, there's passing that off to God and say, God, I don't want to let them get away with it because maybe it's a hurt to me that I just don't feel has been, apologized enough for or recompensed for or shown that there is remorse. but I have to give it back to God and allow God to be the one that will handle it. And if we can't do that, which it's hard to do, it's because we lack faith. Because we lack faith that God is who he says he is. I'm hurt and I don't want to let him get away with it, so I can't forgive it. I got to hold on to it instead of giving it to God, because I don't trust God's going to resolve it in the way I think it should be resolved. And that's me saying that I want my resolution, not God's resolution, because what if God's resolution isn't the same as mine? We have now taken ourselves and said, I think I'm smarter than you, God, when it comes to my relationship with my spouse, and I want it my way even more than I want it your way. And then we hang on to it, and then it's a burden. And it's a criticism of our faith. It's a criticism of our lack of faith. And it's the overarching problem through a lot of things, right? But in this instance here, if we're unable to forgive and allow God to handle it, we are putting ourselves above God and saying, my desire for the resolution here is more important than even trusting God that his would be better or best. And that's a problem. We have to be able to hand it off to him, right? Genesis 50 says, fear not, for when Joseph said to his brothers, fear not, when they were afraid, am I in the place of God? Even Joseph, who had terrible things done to him, said, I'm not God. I'm going to let God judge you. It's not him saying, you're fine, what you did isn't wrong. He's saying, that's not on me to take care of you, that's on God. And so I'm not in God's place, and I will let God take care of it. He has released and forgiven his brothers for that. Romans 12:19, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Right? And that's not saying, yeah, God, go get them. It's just saying, God, I trust your resolution. Even if I don't know what it is or I don't think it's the best for me, I still trust your resolution. And that was what God's saying. Trust my resolution. Trust how I will handle it. Right? So forgiving spouse also remembers that they were forgiven. Right? And that's what I said at the very beginning. To be a good forgiver, you need to remember how forgiven we are. Right? Not just by God, but think of all the relationships in your life, maybe your parents and coworkers and bosses that have given you mercy and given you grace and leniency through your whole life. When we realize what's been given to us and forgiven and mercy for us, it becomes easier for us to give that to other people, even our spouses. So Luke 17, 3 and 4 says, take heed to yourselves. If thy brother trespass against thee, rebuke him. And if he repent, forgive him. And if he trespass against thee, how many? 7 times in a day, and 7 times in a day turn again to thee, saying, I repent, thou shalt forgive him. So how do we forgive? In this passage, I think he gives us three ways to forgive. We rebuke, repent, forgive. Right? So if you're offended by your spouse, talk about it. Go to them and tell them how they've hurt you. Don't hold on to it. Don't pretend it doesn't exist. This goes back to communication and openness and transparency. So if your spouse hurts you, if they do something that's offensive, talk about it. Bring it up. If it's something that you can't just let go and forgive without a discussion, that without hanging on to it and stuffing it in, then talk about it. Go to them. Talk about it. Right? It may seem obvious, like an obvious step, but a lot of times we don't do this. We get hurt and we're like, I can't believe they did that. And then we go into those that have inner monologue and say, and just build it and work it and talk about it and think about it. And we don't go to them and deal with it. We just stew. And that becomes a problem, right? That causes us to hold on to those things. So it seems obvious, but it not always is. So who should go to the other first? Again, I'm talking about your relationship, your marriage only. I'm not talking about other relationships, people in the church. I'm talking about you and your wife, you and your husband. If there's offense given, who should go to the person to bring it up? The person, you say, yes, the wife. No matter what. The person that did the offending or the person that was offended? And the answer is yes, both. The person that offended should go and say, I'm sorry, I offended you. The person that was offended should say, you offended me. Both parties should go to each other. Jesus doesn't give excuse or give place for just the wife to be the one that goes, which actually what usually happens is just the husband. Go say, I don't know what I did. I don't know what I did, what I said, but I'm sorry for all the things I did, said, or might have done, or not done in the last 24 hours. Right? That's typically, no, that does, okay. But that's not how it works. God says, yes, the one that's offended should go. The one that was doing the offender or offending should go as well. Right? God says there's never a time where you should sit and wait for your spouse to come to you. Right? There's never, God doesn't allow for that. God doesn't allow for, okay, you're the offended, so you just sit there and be like, when are they coming? Right? Or I did the offending, they should come to me, so I'm going to sit here and just wait. God doesn't tell any of us to wait. There's never a point. You are always the one to go initiate. So that's the rebuking, the repentance, right? When you ask to forgive, or when you forgive, you set two people free. And I think Brother Tim said this as well. You set the person free that offended you. You also set yourself free from hanging on to that, and that bitterness is there. Repentance must take place for relational restoration to take place. And again, not just an apology or an I'm sorry, right? But an actual will you forgive me, and addressing the problems that are there. Oh, I have so much to do here. It's too much time. You have to address what's involved, right? Everyone involved. And not if you hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have done that, right? Those types of statements, the if-then statements, those don't work good in apologies, right? They don't. You can't blame someone for I know I hurt you, but it's your fault, right? That doesn't go over well. So you have to admit it's specifically what you did, acknowledge the hurt, ask for forgiveness, and then accept the consequences that come, right? There may need some time of aloneness. There may need some time of not separation, but just a moment to compose yourself, right? Whatever the consequences are, you have to be willing to accept those if you are repenting. And then you have to alter the way you behave, right? We're real good at saying, I'm real sorry, and then doing the same thing again tomorrow or later that night, right? I'm sorry I got in trouble. I'm sorry we're upset. I'm sorry things aren't good between us right now. I don't really get a plan of changing anything about it, but I'm just sorry we're in the position we're in, right? That's fake. And we're all good at that. We've all probably done. I've done that. Sorry I did that, and then I find myself doing it again the very next day. Right? Those things have to be altered. They have to be changed. And then lastly, forgiveness. Right? Now I was going to bring up the story of Corrie ten Boom, right? That was in the concentration camps. And she lived through it all. And later on in her life, she was given a speech at a church. And one of the guards came up that was at the concentration camp she was at. And said, I got saved after all that, and God forgive me. Will you forgive me? The guard that she knew from when she was in a concentration camp, and her sister died. And the guard comes up and says, God forgive me, will you? And how do you forgive that? How do you do that? As a person, you can't. You need God to do that, right? And she said, forgiveness, well, I have it there. Forgiveness is an act of the will, can function regardless of the temperature of your heart. Right? So regardless of your feelings, and again, we're not talking about concentration camp problems within our relationships, right? Within our marriage. We're talking about slights. There are some real hurts, and I understand there can be some real deep hurting that can happen in a marriage relationship. But forgiveness is, and God shows us this too, it's a choice. It's an act of decision, the will. It doesn't matter what you feel, what your heart is wanting. It's what you decide to do. So you maybe think you can't forgive your spouse because you have no feelings of forgiveness, but God doesn't say forgive if you feel like it. God says forgive like I've forgiven you. Right? We don't deserve God's forgiveness, but he has forgiven us. So God doesn't instruct us to feel forgiveness. He instructs us to give it, right? So, sorry, it's way too much. Don't be a scorekeeper, be a grace giver. Don't keep score of the hurts. Don't hang on to them. Be kind, be tenderhearted, be forgiving to your spouse, not just to strangers, not just to fellow church members, but to your spouse. Be those things to them. They're not just actions, they're skills, and you can develop the skills. You can practice them. We know, again, as Christians, our ultimate freedom is from Christ and the forgiveness he offers. We can't really enjoy that unless we also do that for each other. So the goal is within our marriage is to be forgiving, is to be kind, to be tenderhearted, to not take the things that aren't allowed, and just be willing to be good forgivers and be good grace givers. And I will stop.